Good afternoon from Thailand. My name is John Ho, and welcome to TCP Cross-Cultural Growth live stream episode number 1. Very excited today. We have some great speakers on the panel. This will be our first live stream broadcast on TCP's Facebook page. And if there's any viewers that are currently watching, please also say hi. And if there's any questions, we can also have a Q&A session at the end. But today, I'm very happy to have 3 important guests from the TCP panel. We have Gurjeet from AVP Internationals Market. We have Tony, CEO of Trade Advisors, who's currently based in Philippines, and Margot, who's the founder of TCP Growth, to join us on this first episode. Welcome you all, and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. So today, we want to start with this topic, and I like this topic a lot, which is about global brands and how to localize your global brand. And to start with this, I want to forward this question to Margot to start with. Why is it so important for a global brand to understand any local market?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Hello from Hong Kong, and thank you, John, for hosting this. I know that you are a very famous live streamer, and then we have a very interesting topic today. And we have 2 special guests as well, like Gurjeet and Tony. I'm sure we'll share a lot of wonderful stories, our own experience on this topic. When we came up with this topic, we thought about actually in our career we have come across a lot of different international brands. They try to especially come into Asia, and then very often we are the bridges for these global brands. And then there are a lot of very interesting stories or stumbling blocks when they try to maybe bring their existing model, thinking that, oh, my brand is a global brand and everybody knows about my brand, so it must be very easy going into a new market with the same formula or just adjust a little bit of the formula. But it turned out to be the situation is not as simple as that. So I think it'll be a good opportunity for us today to explore this topic, how to localize a global brand. I think we have to firstly start thinking about what's the definition of global brand. And my definition is, people think that, oh, is it like Starbucks or McDonald's, a typical one. When you say it, everybody, wherever you are, you understand. You know about the brand. You connect with it. You know the DNA of the brand. But when coming into specific market, and you want the people in a specific market to react in a certain way, I think that is the point about how to localize it to get the local people to do whatever you want them to do. So I think that's the definition. And feel free to jump in to perfect my definition of this to set our topic for today.
So I'm going to jump in here quickly. I guess for a lot of people, global brands are brands, obviously, which they feel like have been around for many, many years. Things, as Margot said, that you recognize, like once you say the name. Interesting enough, obviously, there are more global brands now, which actually have not been around for many years. For example, Netflix, which is one of the ones that Netflix hasn't been around, but we do consider it a global brand now because obviously it's penetrated into each and everyone's family, especially in the past 2 years. And I guess it's difficult not for brands to go global now because with the current digital age, whenever you're thinking about marketing, it's actually difficult just to think about local marketing. You do it on a global scale. And so it's important for any brand that is reaching outside of its own country to already consider how to do global marketing and then obviously becoming a global brand very easily. And we're seeing these cases obviously throughout Asia. A lot of brands that started out, let's say, only in their own territories are looking to branch out. And this is already a topic that they need to think about. Like, how do we then become a global brand from a local perspective also? So we're looking at in two ways. We're not just looking at bigger, let's say, American or European brands. How do they break into other markets, let's say even Latin America or Asia? We're also looking at how brands that originated in smaller territories, how are they becoming bigger brands and being recognized on a global platform? So I think it's interesting that we'll be looking at it from two different perspectives today.
I wanted to take off from where Gurjeet talks about looking at two sides. So I'm looking at the coin with two sides. We're looking at a global brand trying to localize, but we also have to remember that that global brand, sorry, was a local brand that globalized. So it started as a local brand and found its way into the global taste and preference profile. The other thing I wanted to bring up is there's an old book, 1994 copyright by John Naisbitt, The Global Paradox. It says basically that the bigger the world economy, the more powerful the smallest parts of that economy, meaning tribes and communities and local cultures are going to assert themselves as we find ourselves integrating and coming together as a global community. So we have to keep that in mind, that when we go to a locality, that community there is trying to assert itself in the face of a world that's coming together and getting smaller.
This to me sounds like a very interesting discussion, because if you think about all brands to begin with, they always originate from a town of a country, and over the years they expand and they become known as a global player, right? And as they have to put their mark on a location, be it any region, now they have to think about that local community. So I guess the question to start with is the cycle of going from local to global and global to local. What is the change? Because obviously when you put a mark on a different location, it could be a place of a very different culture and a very different consumer behavior. So how should companies go about doing this?
So from a media perspective, I'm going to talk about, I believe that obviously when global brands are looking to go local, so for example, I'm going to bring out Netflix as an example. Not many people obviously know Netflix began operation in 1997 as an online DVD rental store based out in California. If you look at what it's become today, obviously it's very much of a global presence, definitely penetrated into many different markets. And its success story obviously is then based on localization. Not many people believed it at the time, or believed in doing a lot of original local content also. Many people still believe that the American blockbusters or stories being originated out from America were still relevant throughout the world because they were working at the time also. Box office figures looked great. But then obviously, as Tony said, it definitely seemed like people were having a higher demand in local content, high quality local content, which seemed local broadcasters couldn't actually provide because obviously of budget issues, talent issues. And a company like Netflix brought all of that together. So they hired obviously talent, they hired great people who could produce original scripts within the local markets. But more importantly, they were telling local stories, which really resonated with people in those cities and in those countries. And that's why it's doing well, for example, in countries like Germany and Japan and India. And interestingly enough, is that a lot of these stories that they felt like would do well in the local market are actually doing well in other markets. So let's say I'm based in Hong Kong. I would now watch an Indian show, which I wouldn't actually get access to otherwise on Netflix, of very high quality and very good translation also. I think that's also one of the things that we can talk about, is that how translation definitely comes into factor here. Whether you're taking a brand from a global perspective, how do you translate that not just from a language perspective, but also from a cultural perspective into a local market? So all of these, I feel like, are very interesting examples.
I really echo with Gurjeet saying is that, you know, this localization is beyond just the language. When you localize it, for example, you're bringing in Indian, like Bollywood content into somewhere else, you have to understand that somewhere else, you know, what type of like audience behavior or what type of genre these people will like more, and how you can connect them with the Bollywood content. So there are a lot of like a need to understand the cultural aspect and the behavior of the audience or the target consumers before you're coming, you know, into this translation process when you localize your product or your service. And I very much like, actually today our conversation is coming into, like, I see a cycle here, as Tony pointed out, is every single brand is actually, before becoming global brand, it is a local brand. And then by doing a lot of things to make it bigger and bigger, there's expansion phase into it. And after expansion, you identify some markets you want to penetrate into the market. So there is like a deeper, like from a horizontal to a vertical activities, you know, the purpose into in that cycle. So yeah, and I really like this language point that Gurjeet pointed out.
I want to take a sort of a business and economic a point or take on this. When you're analyzing Michael Porter's competitive advantage of nations, he's trying to identify certain case studies of successes in firms or brands that have managed to succeed outside. But they always begin. His observation was that they always begin with vigorous local competition. They always come out of their own local community, having survived and won out in a local battle. And then you combine that with the access to communications and transportation, and then they actually are able to export that brand, that product, whether it's a service or a good. Um, People start taking a liking to it because it's exhibited, the competitiveness, the dynamism, the kind of product that people get attracted to.
I actually have a question for Tony, and maybe you can also further elaborate. The cycle when a brand has to compete with the local competitors, and now they have become a dominant player, and then they go into a new market. Is that strategy kind of repeated, or is there anything that they have to also do to understand better of that specific market? Because the owners, the founders of the company might be more familiar with their originated market, but now if they were to be in a different continent, right, competing with competitors that you might not even heard of, then how is the game plan supposed to be?
Yeah, I know. When you enter a market, and there will be dominant players already. Well, first of all, you might enter a market where your product is new, so you've got the first mover, so you don't have to worry about competition. But then oftentimes you do enter a market, and there is some incumbent dominant player. You do have to take care, meaning you have to be cautious because a local player will always have certain advantages that we sometimes don't factor in, especially political and legal advantage. They have the advantage of manipulating or having allies or knowing the lay of the land, so they're able to make it difficult for you. But of course, the reason why you're going out is that your own market can't sustain your growth, and you need to go out to another market. Also, what you do is you analyze the target market, and if there is a problem with a lack of competition or a market that needs a competitor to come in, somebody to set a new standard, maybe a lower price, a better quality product, then that's probably the right time to move in, and that's probably what motivates a lot of global brands to go into markets where there is a dominant player, but the dominant player is actually not competitive on a global scale.
So this is a question for Gurjeet, and I think you have really interesting case studies, because I understand currently you're also representing brands that are very big in size in the international market and trying to go into the China market. So maybe you can share a few case studies about these challenges or these things that they need to be very delicate when entering the China market.
Yeah, so obviously some of our brands in the past few years have obviously entered the Chinese market. Some of them have previously launched in China, some of them not. They're very much new to the consumer market and or audience in China. So I guess everything when it comes to localizing a brand, the first thing, I think the most important thing is always research, right? Research, they always say, understand the market, understand what the need is, as Tony said, understand who the local competitors are, and then find your niche. Like, what do they need that they don't have at this moment? And I guess we are going in at a stage where obviously foreign brands are welcomed, but also China's in need of a lot of B2B brands instead of B2C brands, because in the past there already are a lot of local B2C brands and foreign B2C brands that have come in. It's raising the standards within the business space, where a lot of our media brands are obviously proving to become successful also. And I think it's also looking at it from a 360 perspective. So not just, let's say, obviously digital is doing well in China at this stage. They obviously do not go on websites. So you can't go into the market thinking, oh, I want to build a successful web page with how much traffic and try to use what we've done in the US as successful as doing it in China. Obviously, a lot of people outside of China do not understand how WeChat works, how the mini program works. So again, it's about understanding and doing those research. And then obviously when the team members are sharing those figures, you actually know what's working and what's not. Because if you don't even understand the program, then there's no point in sort of talking about localization. So yeah, that's one of the things that we definitely work on a lot, in firstly understanding the local markets, talking to a lot of people who are within the industry already doing this and seeing what's lacking. And I'm sure that's like with a lot of other brands also. When they're penetrating into many different local markets. And what's interesting is that the approach we take in different markets in Asia, obviously a lot of people in Europe or the US, they see Asia as a whole, but obviously us being in Asia, we understand that every single market, whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's North Asia, it's very, very different. So every time we approach a different territory or a different market, we take a very much different approach. And the approach, again, will rely on all the research that we've done to start off with to understand what type of approach we should be taking.
And speaking of communication and doing research, as a corporate consultant, and this question is to Margot, is there also ways that you would deploy when telling these corporate management of a super brand, when they obviously come from a place that they think they know the game, right? And now they're in a different playing field. How do you play that card of, okay, this is something that I might have a little bit more experience, or how do you pass through that message so that they can actually listen to the advisors and be more adapted to the marketplace?
Yeah, that's a great question. Usually, like I also really, agree with what Gurjeet has mentioned about. It's the research. Research is very, very important, and because there's a lot of information about a new market, and very often some people or some companies, they got excited. Oh, I want my product to go to A market or B market, C market, based on, everybody is talking about, Southeast Asia is the future, India is huge, is the next China. So they heard a lot of information about projecting a great future for a market. But I always trying to give them some other perspectives. Okay, and that's everyone is talking about, but let's do some research on your particular product. And as Tony has mentioned about, we understand the competition in the market and who are the key players in the market and what are missing in the market and what can you bring into the market. I think that is a very important perspective to think about what you can give to the market instead of like what you can get out from the market. I think the mindset and perspective, I think that's number one, what you can give. And you have to evaluate whether you have a high win or lower win. And then you've come up with a strategy on I say a half year, 1 year, 2, 3 years. What do you want to see? In the short or long term. What are your goals? What do you want to achieve? You want to have just to get your product in. By some strategies like partnership strategies, or you having a local partner to bring your products in, or you really want to have the presence to have an office, to have an operation team in that particular country. So these are everything that you have to have a thorough, a big picture consideration before you actually say, hey, I'm going to hire a team, hey, I'm going to conquer India. I think a lot of research and studies has to be in place before having the action, especially Asian market. I would say, or maybe because I come across a lot of international companies, I would say like Western companies or European companies, they are very interested in the Asian market. But very often I also hear some, dreams, I would say like Indian dreams or China dream, or okay, my product works for China, it will work for India. They might have this projection, but it might be true, but it might not be true. So understanding the micro culture of different markets, I think that's also very important. And especially talking about Asian market, every single country has very different policies. I'm sure Tony knows that very well, as he's an expert in here. Different policies, different government relations, legal procedures, taxation, and so does the company needs to have a local partner first to get into the market faster, or you should say, oh no, I am going to do all the legal works from US or from America, from Europe, or how, so there are a lot of evaluations. At the end of the day, is about what you want to see in a short term or long term. So I'm a fan of a long-term plan, what do you want to see, and then reverse engineer and then what we need to do.
You brought up my favorite problem.
Oh,
legal problems.
Legal.
This is how you earn your money, right?
Yeah.
Yes, your domain, Tony. You can share more with us on this, definitely.
Yes.
Well, what? Sorry,
Tony,
John.
please go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, since you already touched on the legal, but it's something I can discuss a little further down our conversation. But the differences in not just the law, but there's a legal culture behind it, a legal tradition. That's like, if you're comparing, for example, common law countries like the UK, Singapore, versus a civil law country that like Thailand, Vietnam. The Philippines is hybrid. It's got both American and UK, Spanish origins. So even there'd be differences, and then how it's applied, of course, would be something else.
Yeah,
and obviously corporate needs to be very, very aware of the legality, especially in the Asia region, because every country is just so unique with the structure of their laws and the culture, in fact. And Gurjeet, like, talk about legality in China.
And oh wow, oh my God, how much time do we have? So yeah, I guess the question always is whether you should then end up using local counsel also. I think it's definitely necessary to, like, when you are localizing a brand, when you do close any deals in the local markets, to sort of have recommendations from local counsel who understand the local law. As Tony said, it's obviously very different in every single country. But then obviously you're looking at IP rights also, right? And depending on what areas you're looking at, whether it's media, whether it's their merchandise also. You need to see whether in the local markets there are already people using your brands, registered with your brands, producing products already, how you're then going to obtain those rights. That's obviously something you very much would need to look into. How successful it can be for you to actually go ahead and obtain those rights. Some may take up to 3 years for you to even fight that battle, whether it's worth it, or whether it's worth it when you're going into that local market to create new assets for your particular brand, which may actually be more relevant for that market also. So all of these things we obviously consider. And specific to China, obviously, there's a lot of other things you're looking at. You're looking at what suits the market, but also whenever you're localizing, you obviously have the political factor you also need to look into. More so nowadays, you need to be very, very much culturally aware, but also very much politically aware. And obviously that applies to many other different territories in Asia also. Again, it's about research. More so for current situations, but also for future situations also. You need to be, your brand needs to do like brand proof for all of the things that may or may not happen in the future, because in different territories, if something happens, all the investment that you've placed into it, long-term investment, or maybe you placed in a large amount in a short term, it may just go down the drain. So I always think it's very important to have people in the local market who can monitor situations. I don't think it works in just having a team working remotely, because you don't get the hands-on information and you're not actually communicating with, let's say, the local market and reacting to it right away. I believe in today's day and age, even though communication is so easy, it just doesn't work. You have to be there. You have to be talking to the people, whether it's in the government or whether it's in this industry that you're working in. All of these, I think, are extremely important, and is currently what our brands are doing in these local markets.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Like in my previous corporate roles, like bringing international, basically US media companies or media tech companies to China, they have very strong like government relations team, legal team in place, because like behind the products, the beautiful content, there are a lot of issues that people need to be aware of, especially, for example, in content business, is definitely the IP issues. And also, for example, like China, the system and the regulations is very different on content. So you have to make sure that your content is okay elsewhere, but may not be matching or aligned with what the local or government what they like to see. So you need to have a lot of localization effort. What does it mean is that, for example, just a case in point is like everyone knows about the Mickey Mouse, this brand, like Disney brand is everywhere knows about. It's about dreams, it's about fantasy, great things. I mean, I don't need to explain more. Everyone knows about this brand. But when brands like this coming into China, which have a place with very different ideology, different priorities, they are selling China dream, not American dream. So you're putting American dream into China. Actually, it doesn't make sense. Like putting China dream into America, it doesn't make sense. So when coming into China, almost like 20 years ago, the strategy wasn't focusing on the dream. The focus was actually on the language, education, like watching the show, to learn English. That is a seamlessly a beautiful way to integrate into a new market, because they are looking at what the market needs, what how I can help the market to do something, instead of okay, what I can get the market more money. So I think it's a very good case in point to show that the brand consider what the market needs, and then looking from brand's DNAs and brand values, and amplify that specific area instead of the other things, and bring that focus into the market, very, very targeted, and it worked. So yeah, this is one of the case I want to share about. It's the how to localize, and yeah, especially market like in China.
Hmm. And speaking of market needs, I am curious about Philippines specifically.
Mhm.
Is there anything that, Tony, you can share with us? Let's say a global player wants to establish a presence in Philippines. Anything about copyrights or even censorship? That's my favorite topic.
Oh,
uh, is there anything that people will need to pay specific attention in Southeast Asia region, or even Philippines specifically?
Yeah, first of all, let me say that the Philippines, has actually a long history of being a melting pot, being an international hub, so to speak. And we're talking from the 1500s all the way to the present. It's really even the DNA of the people is pretty mixed up. But then, of course, problem is like many developing countries, the political economy is very challenging, and so you do have all of these sort of connections between the very rich and very successful and the political leadership. So you want to be careful about running into trouble with the political side, the political leaders, whether they're at the national or the local level. But you can trust that the brand, an international brand, would do very well because of the taste, the very mixed taste and preferences of Filipino buyers.
So I guess, in fact, when it comes to just a specific country, or even a city in Asia, it can be the difference of miles and miles away. Just because the local culture, the previous history, the government structure, and all of that.
yes, absolutely. Like in China,
Um,
northern China, southern China is on different provinces have different legal structure, and if you bring a brand into China, you have to even consider, which part of China you want to enter first, because
mm.
there might be different privileges or advantages for your product. And yes, I'm so sorry. I have stopped. Tony should be saying something. Sorry, interrupted Tony.
Oh, no, no, it's fine. Um, I was just going to say that, yeah, each country, especially in Asia, you notice when you see pictures or videos of a city or a shopping mall anywhere in Southeast Asia or even Northeast Asia, sometimes you try to figure out where is that? Is that Singapore? Is that KL? And it sort of starts looking very similar. So that the taste and preference would be similar, but then underlying all of that's very different culture. The way of life, the thinking, and this is something that I think that's where I think Gurjeet mentioned that you have to have some kind of local presence, or what I'd call local partnering. You have to have a good local partner. That is also challenging in itself because sometimes those who seem good are not to be trusted. So you have to be very careful about who you partner with, but you do
Mm.
have to have a partner who will give you really a proper understanding of the personality of the place that you're trying to sell your product in.
It's interesting that Tony brought up the shopping mall topic, because yeah, like if you go around and if you go to many different shopping areas in Asia, you would feel like, oh, most of shopping malls are the same. But if you go in, actually go into the shopping malls, you would already see the amount of localization happening. Obviously, you're going to have some bigger brands which everyone knows about, the high-end brands. But then there's always brands which are very much local within these malls. I'm in Hong Kong. When I go to, let's say, Thailand, or when I go to Singapore, I'm always seeing brands that are much of a local presence, targeted to the local audience. And what's interesting here is, even like, for example, if we're looking at cosmetic brands, let's say, obviously, if you go to Korea nowadays, you're going to see a lot of localized the cosmetic brands, because they're targeted to the Korean market. Obviously, a lot of these brands are coming out because obviously Korean beauty is a big thing these days. But what's interesting also is, for example, in Indonesia, many big cosmetic brands have worked well there. But you're having smaller brands coming out, targeting to the different skin types of people living there, the skin color, but also products made with halal sort of friendly materials, which is very much something that works well in, let's say, an Indonesian market. The same brand wouldn't work in a Korean market. And so I think it's you look at a lot of the outside factors and you feel like a lot of these things look the same. But when you actually look inside, for example, inside a mall, you would see that localization is actually happening everywhere. And this isn't just with specific brands. It's also with bigger brands. If you go into, let's say, a bigger brand store in, let's say, Singapore and Japan, it's already different. The layout may be different, because one certain layout may work in one market and one may not. And that's where, again, the research comes in, I feel like. And many companies are doing a very good job with this. For example, let's say Starbucks. If you go into a Starbucks, obviously Starbucks broke into China. A lot of people thought it wouldn't be successful, because they're like, the Chinese are tea drinking culture. Coffee's not going to work there. It's proven to be successful because they worked very well in localization. When they went to France, they knew people would like to sit down in a coffee shop. They're not the sort of American culture where you grab your coffee and go. So they made Starbucks into much bigger spaces, relaxing spaces. It's not the sort of grab and go. It's more of a place for you to relax and chit chat. And again, I think you have someone in the local market expressing those concerns. You can't do what you're doing in the US and just fit it into the local market. And I feel like when brands are sort of looking at any local markets in the world, that's the first thing they need to do. They need to actually go into the market, do some research, look at what is currently available, and then think it's definitely a risk. For example, for Starbucks going into China, it's a risk. They weren't certain whether it would work or not. But definitely a lot of that investment will come out being very much worth it. It's so well known, and the amount of stores it has in China is amazing. No local competitor is able to compete with it.
Are you on mute?
Hey, John,
You're on mute.
Excuse me. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have a question from a Facebook viewer from Glenn. Local reputation is vital to a strong global brand. What if a brand damage occurs? How are you going to fix it? And what are the strategies that you will recommend?
Hi, Glenn. When this has happened time and again, especially with very big brands with global reputations, and oftentimes they do have very strong corporate affairs already in place, who'll do the PR. So there's a combination of the good, sort of good advertising, trying to show the brand as being actually a reputable brand. But then if it does run afoul of maybe they overlook certain sensitivities in the local culture, then the effort also has to go a little deeper. In other words, they have to go back in and do that research and see where they went wrong, and then actually try to go as local as possible in terms of their penetration and trying to reach out to the community. That would be my own practical um, damage control measure or solution. Um, but at this point, I wanted to give that a little piece of advice. As a lawyer, giving advice to those who would do cross-border investment. Um, it's always premeditatio malorum. Expect the worst. When you are going into the market, think about what is the worst problem that would happen, politically, legally, even down to the local level. And that's where what you build into your contracts. That's what you build into your preparation work, dealing with the communities, dealing with political leadership. If you go by that rule of thumb, then you anticipate. In other words, you don't want the dispute to happen. You don't want a court case, but you imagine it's happening. What are the steps that you take to prevent it from happening? Then it builds into your issues about jurisdiction. Are you doing arbitration if a problem happened? And that sort of gives the safeguard against these type of problems coming up in future.
Thank you, Tony. And the other two speakers, would you like to also answer the question?
It's
Yes,
actually a communication problem.
Yes, I'm about to say that. Usually if things happen like this, usually in a corporate setting, the legal department and the communications or PR department will work together very hard to tackle it. And I echo with Tony. The idea is that you dig out the problem, what has been going wrong, and then is a great learning. And then when you rectify the situation, or from a communications perspective, try to respond to it in a very more authentic way and a more local way, to get the local market or local people to understand you are aware of this, and instead of trying to conceal everything. But I think both communications and legal have to work closely together to address this issue as soon as possible, and don't delay for too long, because some markets or some cultures, people are more like imaginative, or the communication is more like word of mouth, and you might be facing a situation is out of control. So address it ASAP.
Yeah, obviously completely agree with what Tony and Margot said, and especially one of the points Tony mentioned. I think before going into any market, you always need to you're hoping for the best, you're preparing for the worst, like any situation you're going into. And so when something like this happens, there has to be a mechanism that you have sort of built in already, in how to respond to such a mechanism. But incident. And obviously this would vary from market to market, because obviously the situation would be different, whether it's a China where it's something politically sensitive that has happened. So you may need to go in and work with those government relations in trying to fix this, or whether it's basically something that you did in, let's say, Southeast Asia, which wasn't culturally sensitive, then you would really need to work on the brand perspective in trying to see how you can fix it with the consumers. So it's also depending on the problem and depending on what the target audience that is, to sort of look into how to fix those problems. But I think more importantly, definitely, firstly, obviously trying to avoid them by preparation and research. But secondly, to sort of have that built in the legal procedure already. And that's why it's so important to go into all of these long form agreements and make sure all of this is already in it, so that in any case this happens, you're already prepared for it. That's what we're trying to do, at least, of course.
Thank you. We have another question from a Periscope viewer, Frocky, and he asks if anyone can suggest, when doing planning, short-term and long-term, what is the period that corporates should, strategize any brand campaigns, I presume?
So specific for us, we don't look at anything on a 1 year period, obviously. Everything has to be at least 3 to 5 years. And that's sort of like still the brand building period. It's more like a 10-year term that you look at building a successful brand, because there's so many factors you obviously need to consider. And also everything is a step-by-step. For us, for the media brands, it may start out with, let's say, digital, and then going into, let's say, events, and then obviously doing larger scale events of, let's say, 10,000 plus people. So I guess it's important, whether it's a short term or long term, to sort of look at it as a step by step and have specific goals within those steps. So let's say for the first 2 years, you need to reach a certain milestone, and then 3 years down the line, what that milestone is. And obviously, if you haven't reached that milestone, you need to go back and review what you could have done better and whether you can reach that milestone in a short period of time. And if not, then you may need to go back and even look whether this brand localization is working at all. So reviewing, I would say, is extremely important.
I agree that milestone is very important. Set in different phases of your project, your projection, and going to a new market. I definitely think that at least like 1 year, what you want to see, and then 5 years. And of course, currently because of the pandemic and a lot of changes, people cannot project something even more than 3 years. But I think it's good to have a vision in place. At least there's a direction to help you, but maybe you can break down the milestone to a shorter term, like half year or a quarter, small milestone, so that you can keep track on whether you're in a right direction or not. And it's always to give some buffer time, especially when you're going into a very complicated market with complicated legal policies, procedures. Sometimes to get a license, it might take a year time to get a license. So buffer this time factoring into your whole plan.
I was about to say, Margot, that usually when we do the legal advice, the horizon is often very long, not very long term, but medium to long term, because especially in Asia, the requirements, the legal requirements, can be quite tedious. I mean, you go through all that process, and you pay lawyers like me to go through all documents and all these procedures. So you're oftentimes, as a lawyer, you're looking at this company being there for the long haul. Notwithstanding, of course, that they would have to look out for their benchmarks within the short term and then medium term frame.
Thank you. We have a viewer from India, and Jayavel is asking if there's any insights about India when it comes to a global brand, and maybe there's also something that they should be aware of localizing in this region. Anyone would like to answer that question?
I guess the same applies to India when it does to any other Asian territory, is that you need to be specifically culturally sensitive also, whichever brand you're going into. But then also understanding there are a lot of up and coming Indian brands, whatever sector you're going into. For us within the media space, obviously with COVID, the media industry has been hit pretty hardly. And then there are a lot of traditional media companies versus a lot of smaller media companies, which are very much into digital media also. So you sort of need to look in what type of partner is better for your specific business. I previously spoke about cosmetic and fashion also. And with a global brand going into an Indian market, let's say, when you're looking at cosmetic, you then need to look at it from a cultural perspective, what may or may not work. Do you want to promote it like a lot of Indian brands are promoting, whether they're doing a good job in, let's say, cultural sensitivity in saying, oh, fair and beauty, is that the way to go? Because that's obviously having a lot of controversy currently in India. When it's fashion brands, then you need to consider whether you want to go obviously a very Western style, or you want to localize the brand to suit the Indian taste a lot more. I think all of these obviously apply in different Asian markets. And when it's specific to India, you also need to consider the religion there also. The people obviously in northern India and southern India are very different, same as in China. So all of those factors definitely, I feel like is something you need to consider.
Yeah, speaking of India, recent years I've been doing quite some tasks between like the East Asia and also India. My observation and my advice from my Indian colleagues is that India is not exactly like another 1.3 billion population China. A lot of people, they just compare directly. Oh, that's China and India is the same, and India is a second China. It is exactly not like that, because India is basically it's a subcontinent. If you travel by train or car, you drive for a few hours, the language is different, the subculture is very different. Of course, and the food is different. You can see a culture, from the food, values are different. And of course, legal also is different, and government relations is different. So I heard from one of my clients telling me that when entering to India market, there's a big challenge is that even doing, actually the client is from China, and they are very used to doing government relations, but when coming into India, it's really a big challenge, because different like states, yes, there's so many different states, and then if you do government relations with A, and then it doesn't mean that you can easily go to B. So basically you have to do like one job times, so many times in order to get the whole market. So going to India is a concept, but you need a lot of effort, like going to the whole Europe, like that type of effort in order to capture the whole India market. Yeah, India is another topic. We should definitely assign another time to deep dive into it.
Thank you, Margot. Now we have about 8 minutes left for this show, and I want to switch gears a little bit, going back to a point that Tony mentioned, local partners, and also building a corporate team in a local market. Now, how important it is, because a lot of times there's a trust issue, like Tony just mentioned, and when there's a trust issue, how do you find the right partners, and how do you build the local corporate management team that would understand not only the global message of the brand, but it's assimilated into the local market? Maybe Tony, you can provide some insights on that.
Okay, well, I know I'll sound like I'm promoting the legal profession here, but oftentimes, in many cases that come to me, that are brought to my attention about investors who are running into problems, it's often a problem that arises because of a conflict with his local partner, the person he chose to trust to open the doors locally. And apparently, he got a local partner to do research, but he didn't do enough research on the local partner himself. Meaning that you have to do some kind of background check on your potential local partners, because you're gonna get married or engaged, so you have to be sure that at least this is a person you can trust. But it's a problem, and I think it would be a problem in most other jurisdictions or most other cultures. There will be all kinds of people, maybe the carpetbagger types, that try to promote themselves and say, we can open the doors for you. But otherwise, you look for local, credible local partners. But the reason I brought up the legal profession is probably you have to start by shopping for a lawyer, because what I usually see is that they look for the lawyer after a problem comes up, rather than, again, anticipating that a problem might come up. Then you have to have a lawyer who's interested in practicing his profession, and not in probably two timing or doing something illicit with this investor. So they'll be looking out for all of the possible pitfalls or obstacles that they might run into, or possible problems that might come up. So yeah, they should consider that when they come up with this local team, or the team that's going to be setting the stage, include your lawyer, include those who are familiar with the business regulations, and who can be trustworthy enough to always watch your back, and tell you what to look out for in terms of the local politics and local concerns.
So it's interesting that Tony brought up the marriage factor here. So finding a partner in Asia is almost like you either have a love marriage or arranged marriage. So when you have an arranged marriage, obviously you have someone who's vetted the partner already, who's told them, oh, this person's from a good background. You obviously know it's going to be a good partner, so you don't need to worry about it too much. Most of the time it's a love marriage. You go into it and you don't really know much about this partner at all. And so you need to start going around and finding ways to vet this partner. For me, a lot of the times is finding people within the industry who already know this partner, or especially doing research and seeing which other partners this company has worked with. And from there, you obviously get, because the media industry isn't that big in many territories, so it's always easy to find a company that has worked with this partner already and seeing whether it's a good partner. A lot of the times, what we like to do also is, if we do have current partners within the industry, we definitely ask those local partners who are there already, because they would have heard about them. And obviously the legal procedures is very important, doing credit checks and all of that on the partner, making sure that they obviously have the ability to pay the money when they have to. So all of these things obviously come into factor, but I think putting out it as the marriage point makes it much easier for people to understand, for sure.
That's an interesting insight, Gurjeet.
Get references is very important before you engage with someone in the local market. And also my advice would be looking for bridgers, the people who understand your product, your culture, and also the local culture. So these people, they are kind of like in the middle, look for these people instead of too far away from you, and then at the end you can't even communicate or have a common ground of understanding. Especially for some cultures, things is a less direct type of communication, but you're expecting more direct type of communication, and there might be some problems arise after that. So it's important. My 2 points is get references from, as Gurjeet said, from your inner circle, to see, to check if the person is like an FBI, make sure that that person or that company is legally okay. And then second one is definitely look for bridgers, not too one-sided.
Okay, great. I love this. So much insight, so many good insights, so many good experiences. We're almost out of time, and I wish we can have more time to actually go in depth of this topic. But just to wrap up this first episode we have, I would like to ask each of the speakers here if there's something very short and precise to advise viewers about this topic when having a local presence for a global brand. What is for you the most important thing that they should be aware of? Maybe we can start with Gurjeet.
So I think with brands anywhere, the most important thing is to think globally, but act locally. So wherever you are, there's no way of just thinking yourself on a local scale anymore. I feel like you definitely need to think of your brand on a global scale, because everything is about globalization these days. Research, I think, is the most important thing. Having people in the local markets who understand the local culture sensitivities, obviously having local legal counsel all of these, I think, are very important factors. I firmly do not believe in running anything from foreign markets anymore. It may work many years back in the days, but currently I feel like it's very important to invest in the local markets to make sure your brands that succeed on a long-term basis.
And Tony?
One thing I wanted to point out before we go is that to reiterate first that a global brand going local started as a local brand that went global, and we should be looking out for all the specific nuances, conditions, and the parameters of the community that you're targeting for your brand. But also keep in mind that since you are a global brand, there is already a taste and preference for you. In other words, you should also trust and take pride in your brand. I think it's because it's a function of the world getting smaller, and I think people, although they find comfort in what is familiar and local, also aspire and want to taste what is global, what is international. They want to taste other flavors. They want to see other places. So that's all a function of the world coming together, and I think that's something we should always keep in mind as we go along and promote our own brands.
Thank you, Tony. And last but not least, Margot?
I have a very simple one. I think it's important to think about what you can give to the market instead of thinking about what you can get out from the market first. I think that will make a huge difference if you understand the people there, what they need, and how to bridge the gap with what they need and what you can offer from your brand.
Great. This is great. Thank you so much. And thanks, Sheila, for the compliments. So to wrap up today's show, I want to ask all the viewers, if you have the opportunity to follow the TCP Growth YouTube page and also the Facebook page. Also, if you want to follow Tony, you can also find him on our page, Cross Cultural Growth. And I appreciate this. I've learned a lot myself. Thank you, Gurjeet, Tony, Margot. Let's do this again soon.
Definitely. Thank you, John.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. For everyone else who's watching this, thank you and have a good day. Bye-bye.